Hi guys, so we have two presentations from Evgenii and from Brian about FHIR, like FHIR terminology repository. So this is a protocol and format for distribution of terminologies. And Brian want to present us the structure definition, a logical model for view definition resource. So maybe let's start from Evgenii and from FHIR.
The FHIR terminology repository, or FHIR for short, is our specification that defines layouts and protocols for storage and distribution of expanded value sets. Also, it defines a set of algorithms to effectively sync updates on the clients to update terminologies and stuff for terminology authoring to create repositories from input terminologies. So the core thing, actually, like the heart of FHIR, is terminology file. Basically, it's just an ND-JSON zipped file that stores expanded value set. And each row in this file is just a JSON that representing some resource. And this JSON is canonically sorted for different calculating stuff, but we will discuss it a bit later. So this file includes code systems that actually reference it in original value set, the value set, and any other value sets that can be referenced in the compose section of the input value set, and of course concepts. So
I think you can show the table, yeah?
Yep. So this is like the structure of terminology file. So at the beginning, we have a set of code system resources. It's just a FHIR code system, a set of value set resources, and concepts. Concept is just actually a mirror from code system concept, and it just represents some code and system and maybe additional back references to value set. So in most cases, it's just a mirror of concept from code system. As you can see, multiple terminology files can exist for one value set, and actually every terminology file stores a different version of this value set expansion. And to track such differences, we have a terminology file tag file. And we'll also have a table for this one. So it's also ND-JSON, where the first row is a pointer to actual version of the value set. So it's like storing the actual hash, the value set. And the next rows is just from to references to store the table of hash changes between versions. So it's like a linked list or something. And actual differences between value sets or terminology files stored in patch files. So difference baked in it, and it's also in the JSON, where each row is just a concept with additional operation property that describes the semantics of the diff. So we add some concept, we remove some concept, or updated the content of some concept. So we just described one value set and all the files related to this value set. But obviously, there can be many value sets in one FHIR model. And to track versions of all of these value sets, we have this master file called tag index. And it's also in the JSON that contains name of every value set in this model and its actual hash. So it's like pointing to the head. And all of this stuff is kind of similar to Git because we're using hash for references and all this tags model and stuff. So yeah, but basically it's just some layout on the file system or S3-like storage. Also, we defined a set of algorithms for clients and authors of FHIR terminology repositories. For example, client can effectively sync updates with master repository using this algorithm. So actually, client getting tag index from the master repository, comparing it with local tag index, and later, after we discovered what value sets change their hashes, we load these patch files to assemble this resulting patch file and apply it to the client. So instead of loading like full terminology, we just requesting patch files from master repository. And same for authoring. So we have tool set to convert, for example, implementation guides or CSVs to FTRs. And there are also algorithms, they kind of similar. We can generate terminology file, diff it, calculate patches, add it to the index, etc., etc. So I guess I can show our terminology repository. There are lots of terminologies for mainstream implementation guides. For example, let's take US core. And here, as you can see, there are a ton of different value sets. We can open any of them, and basically it's just a folder that represents value sets. Here we have terminology file that actually contain all the concepts and stuff, and tag file with version tracking. But here we have only one version, so we have only tag pointer, head pointer, and tag. And also we have utility for introspection of FTRs on the file system or in buckets, because it's just set of rules about how to store files on the file system, and it's pretty easy to create some utility for introspection. For example, right now on my file system, I have FTR for ICD-10, and here we can introspect it, like check different concepts. And also, I guess I can show how it looks like physically on the file system. So basically it's FTR ICD-10. Yeah, so here we have two versions of ICD-10 with get 2024 update for ICD-10, and actual version is this one. So inside, this terminology file looks like this. So it's code system, value set, and just a bunch of concepts, as you can see.
Let's take a look at the patch file.
Yep. So this is like the difference between ICD 2023 and 2024. We can find some, I guess, remove. So they removed this code from the new version. So yeah, it's just stale one. We can find new one by this add. So they add a bunch of new stuff and update. Update means code remains the same and system remains the same. They just change something in, I don't know, hierarchy or display or designation. So it's just updates the structure of concept. So basically that's it.
Thank you.
This looks really cool. One question, I'm wondering, have you thought about supporting code system properties? For instance, there's a code system called Omaha that has a lot of properties that actually in the code system declares relationships between codes. And many times you can use those relationships when you're composing a rules-based value set.
Yeah, to be honest, so when I can tell you, for example, so we have a plugin which transform lowing CSVs into this FTR file, and we preserve all the meta information from original, because it's so the concept it's just a JSON object with a system code, but the other properties may come from the terminology, from original terminology, like SNOMED hierarchies and stuff like this. So it's just ND-JSON, so it's a custom concept resource, and there are no limitation on additional fields which may come from terminology.
I imagine you could use that same idea with code system supplements as well.
We treat code system as a terminology, all code system, as a value set for code system with all concepts. So the FTR can contain the whole terminology. This ICD-10 is a whole terminology. It's a code system, but it's just a value set which expanded all concepts. So we kind of unified both value sets and code systems to just talk about the terminology file. Well, we initially call it value set file, but yeah, but because it may contain the whole terminology system, we call it terminology file. They are sorted, and the diff algorithm is kind of reproducible. So There are a few other rules, but they're quite simple to implement, and we have open source syncing and publishing utils, but it's really easy to write in any language. Couple of days exercise. And John?
Do you sort of have a vision for how this can be used with SQL or with querying to satisfy a view definition, for example? So how does this scheme link up with, say, a typical database engine executing a view definition that might have, say, a member of invocation in it?
Yeah, we have a vision. That's why we're presenting it. So as we discussed it on SQL FHIR version 1, yes, so the concept table looks very promising. So you can load all these concepts into the concept table and then do joins and some other smart operations. So essentially, this is the content for the concept table. And the protocol, how you can easily load this, because for now, everybody transforming loading, everybody transforming SNOMED. So in this case, well, we may have like a standard repository for the SNOMED or ACD10, which will be published into S3-like storage, and a very simple protocol when you just can query these index files and understand that you want to load all these terminologies. So that's the general idea, that eventually we will have more such repositories supported by even maybe by authorities. That would be really nice, because it's provide us completely machine readable reading of terminologies. I understand there are some value sets which are too smart and dynamic, but like UCUM expansion, but this is like 90% of terminology can be handled. Well, I think like 95 in real situation by such type of simplification. And they completely machine readable. Yeah. Did I answer your question, John? It's going to be the concept table. We don't want to push like a concept table maybe into specification, yes, but at least we can mention that you can do work with the terminology through the concept table, and as a recommendation, FTR. So if you like it, so we're gonna push it in the FHIR community as well in the terminology, guys. I already tried a couple of times. But this is really neat. So what we we can share terminologies, and this is amazing. And then,
yeah. So I can't believe I'm saying this, because I hate to, like, this is not the role I want in this group. But one thing that is tricky with terminologies is licensing. So I worked on a project that ran into some problems where with redistributing terminologies that had been kind of compiled in some way. And we ended up having to distribute like tooling to create the terminologies, but where everybody would individually download the raw files from the different organizations. Like I know for example, SNOMED has pretty strict licensing, and the US has a blanket license, but you still have to do a click-through agreement to agree to the US license as an individual using SNOMED. And I don't know what the deal is in Australia. Maybe it's similar, but so one thing that we should think about around terminology, if we're going to do anything, is kind of, you know, like, can we distribute everything as scripts that kind of work off of whatever the raw format is, rather than kind of distributing like pre-baked, you know, summarized hash kind of results of that, which is like a stupid thing to have to consider, because it's like totally non-technical as a reason to do this, but it gets really challenging. Another one is like a CPT has really strict, as yeah, you're nodding. CPT, you can't use the text associated with the codes without paying a licensing fee per view to the AMA, the American Medical Association. And so you can use the codes. So there's often like one loading for codes and then a separate loading for the terminology text, to get around that a little bit. So I don't know exactly where this fits in terms of terminology plans, but it's unfortunately, I think, something we have to consider.
So we clearly understand this problem. So at least what we have for now, for example, for SNOMED, we have a script which translates SNOMED original files, and for the CPT. to the FTRs, and probably these scripts can be distributed as well. We tightly coupled the protocol to S3 like storages, and it can be probably protected by signed URLs and distributed through the signed URLs before you're getting this stuff. Yeah, you can, I don't know, sign something and pay somebody. But at least it standardize the target, yes, so for easy distribution, and you can in a unified way handle all of this stuff.
The expansion sort of seems central to this. So does this rely upon sort of thinking ahead of time and figuring out all the possible expansions you'll probably need, and sort of having a pre-computed thing of like expansions available? Do you also host definitions, like value set definitions, like and if you want to sort of expand a new definition, do you sort of compute that and then put the expansion into the repository alongside the definition, or how does that all work?
Yeah, so in this terminology file, in the header, the first two rows, if it's codable concept or coding system, then the first row is a coding system. If it's as well, the second row is a value set, original value set, which was pre-expanded. It's done as an ND JSON, so you can process in a stream. Yes, but essentially you can think that the terminology file is a bundle of coded systems and value sets, which were used, plus all the concepts. Yeah, but for the new value set, you can pre-expand and guys play it. So potentially, if you have like the value set with a whole coding system, so we can even publish, I think it's even published like open source tools, which can make the expansion of value sets by the value set rules. So it's just like CLI tooling, but it's much easier to work. So you can just.
I guess a follow up on that. So I think if you create a value set definition, and it's like a grouping value set that might have pointers to sub value sets or something, and you can define that in a way where you might not actually specify the version of the sub value sets, so that the expansion might be different depending on the dependencies. So if you could expand the same like definitional value set today and then expand it again next week, and it could be different. And I'm just wondering how would you handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, as you see, everything is hashed, so you can build any tree from this one. So you can work with it. So the idea of the tag, it's like a pointer to the head hash, but as well, so it's called tag because you can create different tags for different versions and even keep technical updates for that version. So you may have different names which are pointing to the different hashed stuff. So the versioning is built in. And if you want like a strict rules, you can recalculate your value set based on tag or even based on specific hash. So that's completely like Git internally works, yes, but it's just specialized for value sets for the big files.
Is there any way in the member of function to specify what expansion you want to use, or would member of always take the latest one?
It depends on the engine which will interpret it. So you can implement the engine which will be version aware or like versionless and just using heads. So this complexity is not covered by the FHIR. So it just provides you the tools to store all possible versions and create even different branches of your terminology and keep these branches even updated. For every version, you can create a branch and then publish terminology files into these branches. The branches can share the files exactly like Git works. Yeah, if anybody interested, so please contact us because we're really interested to standardize it. So, and don't struggle at least with open coding systems. So if we can just publish it on S3 or pull it from someone S3, that would be make our life much easier.
Sorry, one side question. I am by no means an expert for code systems and terminologies, but are you aware of Open Concept Lab? So it's called OCL. So their idea is basically having tooling around sharing terminologies. So if you create like a dictionary, you can share it with others. They can expand it and things like that. and I'm not sure how much overlap that work has. And everything that they do is open source.
I never heard. If you can publish some links and names, yeah, we will definitely investigate.
Yeah.
So is it?
Reason I know
It's not FHIR initiative. Yeah, it's something.
it's not FHIR. Yeah, it's not
Okay.
FHIR specific, but yeah.
Yeah, we will definitely take a look. Yeah, because I think not only FHIR community struggle from terminologies. So let's go to Brian presentation.
So what I did is I created a, we had a conversation last time where we talked about, did we want to like make this a specification or not? And I think people said that we wanted to, perhaps. And so I did an experiment where I used IG Publisher, created a basically the starts of what the FHIR community would do in a validated implementation guide, made up what I thought could be the canonical root and the ID. This is all subject to change. I built it on the existing SQL on FHIR 2. The MD files that you all have been writing basically moved into this directory called page content to be compatible with the IG Publisher tooling. And I tried to break it down a bit into different sections, which I can go over. And then I also created a couple view definition logical models to review. And I talked to Josh on Zulip, and he was of the opinion that we wouldn't need a new repo and we could use the existing SQL on FHIR v2 repo if we wanted to like have it get hooked up with the HL7 tooling to create a community ballot that would automatically like build the IG using their existing like build mechanisms. And so I kind of also took a crack at taking the MD files and arranging some hierarchy for usability. So when this builds, this is kind of the IG. And so a lot of this is a combination of the README MD and a lot of the files that you had. So as you can imagine, this is like a pretty large pull request. It's introducing a lot. So I don't know how the group wants to handle that. But I tried to break the specification into kind of this intro section. There's a purpose section. And so I basically adjusted some of the headings and fixed up a little bit some of the, I didn't change any of the substance of the text. So there's like a purpose section. There's this layers section kind of following along. I thought maybe someday we could have a diagram or something that would be nice. The view definition is kind of a big part of it. So this is kind of, again, pre-existing content. There's the columnar database section. The section has a lot of subsections, by the way. So I don't know if this maybe could get broken up. And then the tech matrix is at the end. One thing I did notice going through these specifications is there's a lot of, if we were to do this, this will force us to kind of go back and do some editing, because there's a lot of, I think, stuff that was thought of originally that maybe we're not doing now. There's the SOF prefixes, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I remember from early on that I'm not sure if it's still the current thinking. And lastly, I made a couple view definitions. So I'll look at the minimal one first. And so this one took the view definition. I kind of tried to make the names a little more consistent. So expression instead of EXP or EXPR, I made it the full word expression, and description the same way, just to kind of follow a pattern that you see more broadly in HL7 specifications. Whenever the name had that constraint, there's an invariant rule that uses a simple regular expression to make sure that some of these names we want to be like database friendly. So there's this invariant called SQL name that's in here. I also did things like the resource code is tied to the resource type value set. So this is like, this is actually R5. I probably should fix that, but this is like all the resource types that are in the FHIR specification. And so that this is kind of like the minimal. And then I think someone talked about, having canonical references and making this more like a knowledge artifact, or following, I think R5 calls it the definitional pattern, which this feels like a definition because it's in the name even. And so it basically is the same, but it wraps it with all the stuff that you might see from a canonical resource in FHIR specification, such as URL and version to give us that a way to refer to it canonically. There's identifiers. The name is already there. We're just adding our invariant to it, and all these other kind of usage context and these flags that we see on other FHIR resource types that are kind of knowledge artifacts. Happy to report there's no QA problems, so it's building successfully. But yeah, I wanted to kind of show this off, and I think it adds a lot of files to the Git repo, but hopefully it's, the main substance is kind of just moved into this input page content directory. Hopefully that's not too big of a problem, but yeah, anyway, I could put this up as a pull request, or we could decide not to do this, but I wanted to kind of present, and there's actually a lot of material here. Like I didn't read every single thing before. I was kind of browsing, but doing this, I actually had to read everything and understand it. And so this was a good exercise for me personally as well. So I can't tell if someone's raising their hand or not. No one's raising their hand. So I don't know. With any feedback on this or thoughts?
Looks amazing, yeah. Thank you.
Amazing.
I think we should discuss with our main editor, with Ryan, to not have conflicts, but I think if there is no, let's merge and set up CI to build this IG.
I love it. Yeah, and so yeah, I think that this format makes so much sense. It gets us in the direction that we want to go. Yeah, and like the incorporation, the breaking down of the markdown files and everything. Obviously, we will continue iterating on the spec there, but I think we have like a pretty good high level structure. Yeah, I would love to make this change. Yeah, and I think that we'll go through, and I mean, there's a few things I think as you pointed out. There's Brian, as you noticed, that there's a few things that are probably out of date or don't make sense. But I mean, I think that it might be best to kind of move to this structure, and then we can edit it and adjust as that happens there. So yeah, I mean, I'd be inclined, like even at a high levels, like this is more like a flattened FHIR views or something like that. So maybe we're over indexing on. I mean, certainly SQL patterns are the primary use case, but we have other implementations of it as well. So I guess like if there's one thing I would change perhaps prior to like adopting this is like maybe if we call the top level name something like flat FHIR views or something like that to generalize it a bit. But frankly, I think it'd be totally fine just to kind of adopt this as is and edit it post merge as well.
I think one of the big things is just agreeing on the ID and canonical root, because that just making sure that if you wanted to change the ID of this to flat FHIR, we might want to do that now-ish.
What means UV? It's universal, or
UV is universal. Yeah, that's the way they do it. I thought you were the one who knew how HL7 standards work in committees. Yeah, UV is universal, and that gets us this this United Nations logo.
Maybe let's merge and fix.
Well, so this pattern is typical of, if you look at most of the other HL7 ballots, you'll see HL7.FHIR.realm, and then at the end it's usually a slug. That's the thing. And so I just I just came up with this, and then you can see there's a relationship between ID and canonical. But I guess if we want to change this, we could do that now.
But I think that's good. So it's I think the Ryan was talking about the view definition name, yes, as a resource.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, I guess like, I mean, if
So
if this
instead
group
of view
wants-
definition, a flat FHIR, or you mean this name, I guess. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think we can discuss with Graham maybe how to better name it.
Okay.
Yeah, view definition sounds maybe too generic, yeah, a little bit, but
I like FHIR views, but maybe this is like a discussion that, yeah, I agree. We should.
I think
loop in
if it
Graham.
becomes a part of FHIR, then it's gonna be like fire, yes.
FHIR is implied by it being a FHIR IG. That's what you're saying, maybe.
Yeah, I do like the idea of maybe something like flat view or something like that, that to Ryan's point, like gets to the, like the goal of the resource a little bit, but I don't know, naming is
Maybe
always
the data
a long
view.
discussion.
Yeah.
So what
Oh,
I
is
could
that so?
do is I could put a pull request up, and then I can have Josh help me set up the thing that automatically builds, the build website. And then after that, any pull request, anything that gets merged in, we'll build.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, and I think that if we want to merge this and do subsequent edits there, and yeah, that sounds like the way to go. Brian, this is great. I love seeing this. I did not expect us to see this sort of structure and sort of clarity and alignment with the best practices so soon. I mean, thanks so much for working on this. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and I would urge everyone to look at how I tried to arrange the content in like a hierarchy, and that was like that could use some review, and I'd be happy to make that usability better if we want to.
As well, we need a nice logo for SQL on FHIR. Yeah, Brian, do you have?
I made a text logo.
Yeah.
You didn't see it?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, but I think we can work on the logo.
Look at the on is a different type.
Yeah, I see.
That's a logo.
This is good idea. We can work around it, like SQL highlighted name. Yeah.
When our problem space becomes the logo, we know we're doing well. So yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I asked
At least, like,
Nikolai for a
something like
logo,
database
and
in the
he
FHIR,
said
yeah.
he told me to make one, so I did.
Okay.
Sorry to jump. So then are we going with the SQL on FHIR, or do we want to change it? Because I can see that this can be used for other purposes as well, as Ryan said.
Yeah, I can tell you at least. So I discussed with Graham and Lloyd, and they said that's okay if we keep the SQL on FHIR name. So there's no problem with that. So they said that nobody, I mean, commercial bodies could not use SQL on FHIR because it has a FHIR word in it. So, and for the community open source project, and eventually maybe the part of the FHIR, I think that it's good. So I don't see, at least from this side, any problems with that. So I remember some meetings when we discussed here, but from legal point of view, from FHIR side and HL7, we don't see any problems with that. I don't know what other consideration, what other name could be.
Yeah, I think that the concern that is less on the use of FHIR in the name. I mean, you could argue that's redundant, but I mean, at the same time, if it helps, if it's a nice shorthand, then I don't mind it. I think it's like that. It's not deeply tied to SQL. It's more about flat views, and so if we want to call this FHIR views or flat views or something like that, I would prefer. I mean, that makes more sense to me, just to call it flat views or FHIR views, and so obviously we'll like in the documentation, SQL will be a commonly used example and described in the view runners and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that the key piece of the specification is a definition of a flattened view of FHIR, and I think leaning into that key piece, it would probably be sort of could avoid confusion, I think, going forward.
Yeah, but I hope eventually we will come to some queries definition and other stuff. So at least that's my dreams, that we will produce a couple more resources. So let's maybe keep SQL on FHIR. At least it's branded now a little bit, yes. And when we're gonna publish, we can discuss. Yeah. So because
Okay, yeah, I'm either way. It's like I would rather merge and then iterate there than sort of legislate it indefinitely pre-merge. So I'm fine with
my vision after we will complete with a view definition resource, we will probably come to the query definition resource, which will operate on top of this view, and so because people will want to share the queries as well, yes. And if we standardize the table, so potentially like ANSI SQL. Queries can be shared as well. So I can imagine like NCQA publishing the bunch of views and bunch of report queries. So, and you can just take and run and get all everything you need. Yeah.
Okay.
How about
Yeah.
if we call, what if we call it SQL or no SQL on FHIR?
No SQL is that. Now people call it news.
How about SQL or not SQL on FHIR?
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go with it as is. We'll work on it.
So, and then another kind of newbie question, as I don't know exactly the process for IG publishing. So what then would the source of the truth be the IG from this point on, or do we still iterate on the MD file and then republish?
This change would update the structure of the Git repo. I don't know if you can see my left-hand side here, but basically the Git repo has a bunch of this boilerplate stuff, and all the content MD files end up in this special directory input page content. So this is where all the MD files are, but this also lets us put in FHIR shorthand and other stuff that we can use when we build the specification. And then to drive the little menu at the top, if you're interested, there's a menu in the sushi config file that you can adjust. So there's more stuff here, but it's shaped like a conventional FHIR thing.
As I understand, so you change the MD files, you push to repo, the CI, like GitHub Action will generate this site for us. Yeah.
And I don't know how the official release process goes, but if this does get validated at some point, then there'd be an official version 1.
You do the branch. Okay, amazing. So we kind of have 10 more minutes to discuss other topics. Thank you, Brian. So now we have a good face. We close to be standardized. One step more.
Everything else is going to be anticlimactic after that. That was amazing.
We have, I think some of us at least are going to Phoenix. What's the roadmap? I feel like we had a lot of productive stuff happening. What is the next phase of the project? Is there a roadmap to kind of continue with? Or are we done?
I don't think we're done. So we will try to publish the first version, and I think the key feature is a view definition. Yes, so we can work on Connectathon on this stuff, and maybe make a first ballot. Something. Let's play this game a little bit. Yeah. I think it's still going to be considered not like the standard FHIR resource, but there's some a FHIR community project, but at least we should start learning how to do this, because I hope eventually that we will publish it officially. And Dan has a lot of experience. Then you can comment on this.
I have limited experience, but
you published the bulk API,
we did get bulk through. Although we should maybe pull in Gino, who has some recent experience publishing new FHIR resources, which I think was a much more involved process than just balloting an IG. And so we can maybe, I'm sure he would be happy to join this call and give us a little overview of kind of what the steps are in adding a FHIR resource, because I think that was a pretty involved process. So maybe we can pull him in, and he can educate all of us about the pain and efficiency and effectiveness in doing that. I guess what I want to say about kind of next steps, I think we need, at least my view is we need to do some implementation of the current draft. So I guess on my agenda, if I can clear a day or two, at least before the Connectathon, is to try to create a prototype in JavaScript that works, and then get some of John's tests working through there. And I think, like, I guess as a group, I would, I guess my proposal would be creating a lot more unit tests and several implementations and some real world examples in addition to the tests, and kind of iterating there. Like, I guess I just don't feel like we're really ready to start a balloting process at this point. I think it's a good parallel track, because I suspect there's going to be a lot of hoops to jump through if we actually want to create a new resource. But I guess I kind of suspect a lot of other folks are in a similar boat, but certainly speak up if you disagree. But I feel like we may still make changes to the view definition based on kind of some implementation experience. So I don't want to lock any, I guess I personally don't feel confident enough to lock things down without a lot more implementation and a lot more kind of scenarios and testing real world scenarios. So I guess my goal for the Connectathon and then the next month or two is to try to do an implementation and expand the test suite and do some real world use cases.
Yeah, I completely agree. So if we will work out on the test cases, which will cover the at least current specification, and work on implementation, that's the very good goal for the Connectathon.
Yeah,
As
totally
well,
great. And there are some things we want to still add and tune and clarify in the spec itself. I mean, so yeah, we need to continue. We're not done yet. I think we're in great position. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, we're not done. And yeah, I think this is absolutely the right thread.
Yeah, we may have some design sessions to discuss the general layout, yes, some terms and other stuff. And yeah, and to work manually something, I think the tests, cases, and implementation is very good. Yeah, and I think even if we generate this site so that we can from test cases we can generate some documentation as well. So this is idea for Brian, because you can show what's coming, what should be outside, and this is a good examples for documentation, source for documentation.
Yeah, and then we need clearly a several-day discussion about logos and the naming and logos, which seems like the main issue that's outstanding. But I didn't say this, Brian. I'm really, blown away. I think this is great, and like I think it makes the projects. I think for new folks to the project, it'll be super helpful to have a familiar kind of entry point. I've been pointing people to the repo and saying like, but don't look at the README on the main page, click into this file. And like, I think that's confusing. So having like an actual IG, even if we're still iterating on some of the content, is fantastic.
It wasn't really the hard part. It was coming up with the content that you all did. And I think I'm excited about this project. So I'm happy to put the effort in, and I'll try and get that set up for next week. So hopefully by next week, we'll have like a site built.
So I can just sort of give you a quick look at what the tests currently look like, so we can maybe think about how we can integrate them. By the way, I've actually already created a couple more pull requests based on the feedback that I got from the initial pull request. So I just created a directory here, and it has three things. It has the test data itself. So it's just got ND.json files, and we can add as much as we like here. I've just kept it super simple at the moment. Like, I think it only has a couple of patients, and I think I added like some US core examples or something so that the flattened blood pressure example looked all right, but we could add whatever we like in there. And then the second one is the definitions themselves. So just literally a JSON that conforms to the spec. And in the results, just corresponding result files to to show what we expect those results to be. And excellent pickup, Nikolai. I'm almost a bit embarrassed I didn't pick this up myself, that to enforce sort of deterministic ordering on these things. So I've gone through and done that now, and I've just ordered them by like all the columns in sequence ascending. I don't know if that's okay. So that's kind of what we've got so far. So I feel like this is a really important part of it, because it's really the most unambiguous way to describe a lot of this behavior, which can get a little bit hairy. So it'd be really great if we could incorporate this into the spec or the IG somehow. I'm not sure if this is just sort of arbitrary files or if we actually have some sort of special rendering of this, but I'm also not that experienced with this. I've cut a couple of sort of played around with a couple of IGs before, but I'm not really an expert. So yeah, take your advice on that.
Would you expect perhaps the results to be also ND-JSON, or why are they tab separated?
Good question. I don't think they have to be tab separated. In fact, Nikolai suggested that we actually just merge them all into the same thing. So we could actually have like a JSON superstructure here where we sort of say request and response or expectation. We could literally just have them as JSON array of arrays if you wanted to. So I'm very open to whatever makes sense there, as long as we've got some files that we can hoover up within our implementation and generate sort of parameterized tests for, then it doesn't really matter. Dan, do you have something to say?
So I think this is great, first of all. I guess the one thing we should think about kind of early on is in terms of structure with the fixtures, how we want to link the specific kind of data sets to the result. So like if I added a test case that required a particular element in patient, and I add that to the patient ND-JSON file, I'd break all the other tests now because they'd have different results. And so if we're going to be adding tests, I think we either need, like one way to do this would be to have a subdirectory where the data is the fixtures for a test suite. And then you would create another kind of folder structure with data and a different test suite, or we could do individual fixtures per test, or we could have some way of referencing files in the test. But like, so a lot of options, and I don't feel strongly about any one. This particular structure where the fixtures are shared between tests without kind of any deterministic way to link them, I think is going to maybe run into some scalability problems as we add tests.
Yeah, I agree. I would introduce one more layer of indirection like this. Can be called case or suite or something like this. And you can share, so you can provide different fixtures for different tests. Yeah, maybe if we put it in one JSON file, that's even more simpler. So in this JSON file, you can put a fixture, set of views, and set of results. So maybe like view result, view result, view result. So, and I think that what's other nice, I think the implementation by Josh, like JavaScript implementation, even can build into our site. So maybe if then you will work, because potentially we can run all of these examples even on the client side in implementation guide, and we can use it as a reference implementation, at least for some logical stuff. Yes, and always keep up to date with the spec. Yes, like JavaScript implementation. And it's going to be interactive, and I think it's going to be very nice, like to demonstrate what we have, so we can.
Yeah, actually, on that, my question was that, do we have like a formal, like a continuous process to go from definitions to the results, or is this just like you have? I mean, by the way, these are actually great. I mean, I'm a big fan of having these examples. But have you just manually created them, or is it like a continuous process?
So there are multiple implementations. I think what they're referring to there is that Josh Mandel has done a JavaScript implementation, which we could say is like the reference or at least sort of a good candidate for this sort of thing because it's one of the simplest ones. And we could have that running. We could have something running continuous integration. We could also have like a sandbox type thing. But yeah, for example, I'll be sort of integrating these tests into the Pathling test suite and running that continuous integration over Pathling. But for the spec itself, yeah, we could think about what sort of automation we want to put around it to have a bit of a sanity check on it.
Yeah, for me, like there's a JSON schema spec, yes, which has a very nice test suite. So when I were implementing JSON schema, so I just cloned by submodule all the test cases in a JSON, and they provide a bunch of tests, and you just run all of these JSON files. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. I would like to add this repo as a submodule to our implementation and just write some runner on top of this structure and put it on CI.
I kind of like keeping the view definitions separate because they're one-to-one with the logical model, and I think that'd be easier to generate. But I think there's a third piece missing. It's almost like, you know, the Gherkin syntax, given, when, then. So we have the three pieces, but we're missing like, given this, when this view definition, then this result. I feel like you still might be nice to keep them separate, but we need that kind of orchestration to everyone's point, like which input and which view definition gives you which result.
I can warn about like to write more integrated tests, because what I see this kind of anti-pattern happen with the FHIR pass and the validation in FHIR. So at least we can think about unit tests, the very simple one aspect oriented like a test case, which don't interfere with the rest. Yeah, so we can only demonstrate how one for each works, then how two nested for each work. Yeah, how the select works, how like upper bound work. And I think when we will start authoring this test, so we will understand how to do it better. Me personally really like it's done in JSON schema, so you can go and see they have like case files, suite files like in one JSON, and they test one aspect, and they provide a bunch of files even for different versions and folders. And for me, at least, like this unit test is even more valuable for implementers than having a bunch of integration tests.
Yeah, unit tests are also helpful if folks aren't supporting the full spec. So if we want to have a lot of backends, so it might be a FHIR backend versus a SQL backend versus a Spark backend, and like there may be feature subsets that different backends want to support, or particularly around optional features, or we may make some of the required features optional down the road because of that. And so I agree, like if we can organize our tests by function, then people could say, look, I don't support the, interval pieces or, date pieces, but I support everything else. And for my use case, that's fine. And so then they could just run parts of the test suite. And so I think I like that idea of kind of breaking out having a set of unit tests and having a set of integration tests kind of separately makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I can work,
not the most novel observation.
Yeah, I can work on unit tests example for to the next meeting. So because I did this for the FHIR pass, like one aspect. Yes, I really like how it's done in JSON schema, so I can So, but what we discussed, at least what was the problem with the FHIR pass and the validation. Yeah, that for example for the profiles, Graham just created like this play the real world resources with a bunch of errors, and it's very hard to understand. So what's going on when you run this test? You're just getting a bunch of errors, and they don't allow you to focus on a specific feature you want to implement. With the JSON schema, it was very nice because every key like has a bunch of cases, and you can run only these cases and implement one key, then go to another key. And if we would be able to do the same for the SQL on FHIR, that would be nice. like one FHIR pass function in a time, one construct like for each and select in a time, and then later maybe some integrated examples. Okay, guys, so I think we out of the time. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye.